Elena's vision blurred as Bronson's fist connected with her jaw, stars exploding behind her eyes. Blood filled her mouth. Around them, 47 male trainees formed a circle, watching the intelligence analyst get destroyed. "Stay down," the drill sergeant barked. But Elena had watched Navy SEALs fight for 18 months in Yemen, silent, learning, memorizing every move while they called her just the note-taker. She swept Bronson's legs, locked his arm, and heard him scream as he tapped out. The circle went silent. The outsider had just changed everything, and Fort Sentinel would never be the same. Before we begin Elena's journey, hit that subscribe button and follow this story to the very end. Comment below with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's dive in. The bus door hissed open at 0500 hours, and Elena stepped onto the tarmac at Fort Sentinel Advanced Warfare Training Center. The Arizona desert stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by the brutal concrete structures designed to break soldiers down and rebuild them into something harder. "Name?" The guard at the checkpoint didn't look up from his clipboard. "Reeves, Elena Reeves, intelligence specialist transitioning to combat operations." That made him look up. His eyes traveled from her face down to her boots and back up again, lingering on her 5'6" frame with obvious skepticism. "You sure you got off at the right base, ma'am? The administrative training facility is about 200 miles east." Elena had heard variations of this comment for 6 weeks straight, ever since her transfer orders came through. She kept her voice level, professional. "I'm sure. This is Fort Sentinel, Advanced Warfare Training, Class 2024-Charlie. The guard shrugged and waved her through. "Your funeral." The processing building was already packed with bodies. Massive bodies, Elena noted. She counted quickly as she entered. 47 other trainees, every single one of them male. Every single one of them looking like they'd been carved from granite and bad intentions. "Well, well, look what wandered into the wolf den." The voice came from a mountain of a man leaning against the far wall. He had to be 6 feet 4 inches, with shoulders that barely fit through standard doorways. His name tape read Bronson. "They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel now, aren't they?" He directed this to the men around him, who laughed on cue. "What's next? Bringing in high school kids? Maybe some guidance counselors?" Elena set down her gear bag and met his eyes. "Bronson. Jake Bronson. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 Bronze Stars, currently stationed at Fort Bragg with the 82nd Airborne. Excellent service record until that bar fight in Fayetteville last year. You're here because your commanding officer gave you a choice: elite training or a desk job for the rest of your career." The laughter died instantly. Bronson's face went from amused to dangerous in half a second. "You don't know anything about me." "Intelligence specialist, remember? I know exactly who everyone in this room is. I know your service records, your strengths, your weaknesses, and why you're here. That's what I do." "Then you should know you don't belong here." Before Elena could respond, the door at the front of the room slammed open. Master Sergeant William Cord entered like a human wrecking ball, 6 feet of pure intimidation wrapped in a uniform that had seen actual combat in 3 different continents. His face was a road map of scars, and his eyes had the flat, assessing quality of someone who'd seen men die and learned to live with it. "Sit down and shut up." The room obeyed instantly. Elena found a seat near the back, deliberately away from the main cluster of trainees. Cord walked to the front and turned, his gaze sweeping across them like a weapon. 48 of you walked into this room. Historical data says 30 of you will quit before week 8. Of the 18 who remain, maybe 12 will actually graduate. Look around. Most of you won't make it. He paused, letting that sink in. This is not basic training. This is not even advanced infantry training. This is the program that produces the soldiers who handle the missions that don't officially exist. The operations that never make the news. The problems that can't be solved with 1,000 troops and air support. His eyes found Elena. Some of you have been sent here because your command thinks you're exceptional. Others are here because you have something to prove. And a few of you, his gaze didn't waver from Elena's face, are here because someone very high up the chain of command thinks traditional military thinking needs to be challenged. The weight of 47 hostile stares settled on Elena's shoulders. Reeves. Elena Reeves. Stand up. She stood, keeping her expression neutral. Tell the class why you're here. It was a trap, and they both knew it. Anything she said would be used against her. I'm here to learn advanced combat operations, Sergeant. You're an intelligence analyst. You've never been in direct combat. You've never cleared a building under fire. You've never had to make split-second decisions that mean the difference between your team living or dying. Cord's voice was clinically brutal. So I'll ask again. Why are you here? Elena's jaw tightened. She could feel Bronson's satisfaction radiating from across the room. Because I've spent 18 months embedded with SEAL Team 7 in Yemen, observing operations that most soldiers never even hear about. Because I've watched men who are exceptional at violence apply intelligence to warfare. Because I believe that brains can be just as deadly as bullets, and I want to prove it. The room went completely silent. Cord's expression didn't change. Big words. Let's see if you can back them up. Everyone, gear up. We're running the hostage crisis drill in 30 minutes. Reeves, you're up first. The mock-up building was 3 stories of concrete and rebar, designed to simulate an urban combat environment. Elena stood in the equipment staging area, strapping on body armor while the other trainees watched from the observation deck above. Standard scenario, the drill instructor explained without emotion. 12 hostages, 2nd floor, central room. Unknown number of hostile forces. Your objective is simple. Extract the hostages with minimal casualties. Time limit is 45 minutes. Most trainees take 30 to 35 minutes. The record is 28 minutes, set by a former ranger with 6 years combat experience. He handed her a training rifle loaded with simulation rounds. Any questions? Elena looked up at the observation deck. 47 faces stared down at her. Some curious, most skeptical. Bronson's expression was openly contemptuous. No questions. Timer starts when you enter the building. Good luck. Elena approached the main entrance, then stopped. She could practically hear the drill instructor's internal dialogue. She's going to freeze, she's going to panic, she's going to prove she doesn't belong here. Instead, she turned and walked away from the entrance. Reeves! Wrong direction! Elena ignored him. She circled the building once, studying the structure. The windows, the sight lines, the probable defensive positions. Her mind was processing information the way it had learned to in Yemen, watching Chief Petty Officer Marcus Wade plan operations. Time is running, Reeves! She found what she was looking for. A ventilation grate on the east side, partially concealed by debris. She knelt down, examining it. On the observation deck, Bronson laughed. She's looking for a way to avoid going in. Called it. Elena pulled a multi-tool from her belt and removed the grate screws in 40 seconds flat. The opening was tight, barely wide enough for her frame, but she slid through without hesitation. Inside the ventilation system, darkness swallowed her completely. She pulled a small flashlight from her pocket and oriented herself. The shaft ran horizontally for about 20 feet, then angled upward. Standard building design would put the central ventilation hub near the middle of the structure, probably between the 2nd and 3rd floors. She moved through the shaft with practiced efficiency, remembering every lesson Marcus Wade had taught her during those long nights in Yemen when he'd explained how SEALs thought about urban warfare. Conventional forces think about doors and windows, he'd said. We think about every possible way into a structure. Sewers, ventilation, maintenance tunnels, roof access. The enemy expects you to come through the front door, so you come through the ceiling instead. The shaft opened into the ventilation hub exactly where Elena expected. She could hear voices below, the role players acting as hostile forces, positioned throughout the building. She counted at least 4 distinct speakers, probably more. The hostages would be in the central room, which meant directly below her current position. She examined the ductwork carefully, found the seam she needed, and used her multi-tool to create an opening large enough to see through. 12 people, zip-tied to chairs. 2 armed guards at the door. Standard defensive position. They were watching the hallways, expecting an assault from the corridors. They weren't watching the ceiling. Elena widened the opening carefully, minimizing noise. When it was large enough, she positioned herself directly above the guards and dropped. She landed between them, using the impact and surprise to her advantage. Training took over. Techniques learned from watching SEAL hand-to-hand combat drills 1,000 times. She had both guards disarmed and unconscious in less than 15 seconds. The hostages stared at her in shock. "Stay quiet," Elena whispered, cutting their zip ties with her knife. "We're leaving through the ventilation system. It'll be tight, but it's safer than the hallways." "Are you serious?" one of the role players whispered back. "That's insane." "That's smart. The enemy is expecting a firefight. We're not giving them one. Now move." She helped the first hostage up into the ventilation shaft, then the second, creating a human chain. It was slow, methodical work, but it was quiet. On the observation deck, confusion was spreading. "Where the hell is she?" someone asked. The drill instructor was staring at his monitors, which showed the building's corridors. Empty. No sign of Elena anywhere. "She didn't abort, did she?" another trainee asked. Cord, standing at the back of the observation deck, said nothing, but his eyes held something that might have been approval. 18 minutes after entering the building, Elena emerged from the ventilation system with all 12 hostages. Not a single shot fired. 0 casualties. The drill instructor checked his stopwatch 3 times, certain it was malfunctioning. 18 minutes and 43 seconds. All hostages extracted. No engagement with hostile forces. Elena removed her helmet and looked up at the observation deck. The faces staring down at her had changed. The skepticism was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Fear. Bronson's expression was the darkest of all. The debriefing room felt like a courtroom. Elena sat at the front, while Master Sergeant Cord reviewed the operation footage on a large screen. The other trainees filled the rows of chairs behind her, and she could feel their hostility like a physical weight. "Reeves, explain your tactical approach." Elena stood. The objective was hostage extraction with minimal casualties. A frontal assault would have resulted in a firefight, which creates risk for the hostages, so I eliminated the fight entirely. "By crawling through the ventilation system like a rat." The comment came from Bronson. Several trainees laughed. Cord's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Bronson, when you break the 18-minute record, you can comment on tactics. Until then, shut your mouth." The laughter died. "Continue, Reeves." Navy SEALs train extensively in unconventional infiltration because it reduces variables. If the enemy doesn't know you're there, they can't respond. If they can't respond, you control the entire engagement. Elena kept her voice level, professional. "I used the building's infrastructure against its defenders. They were positioned to stop a conventional assault. I didn't give them one." "And if the ventilation system had been defended?" "Then I would have adapted. But basic reconnaissance showed no defensive positions in the maintenance areas. The role players were focused on protecting against a standard combat approach." Cord nodded slowly. "Sit down." He turned to address the entire room. "Every single one of you would have gone through the front door. Every single one of you would have engaged in a firefight. Some of you would have extracted the hostages. All of you would have taken longer and risked more casualties. He paused. Reeves didn't do what you expected. She did what worked. With all due respect, Sergeant, Bronson stood up. That's not real combat. In the field, you don't have time to crawl through vents. You have to move fast and hit hard. Is that what they taught you in the 82nd Airborne? That's what works in the real world. Cord's smile was cold. Then tomorrow, we'll test your approach against Reeves' approach. Urban warfare scenario. Live simulation rounds. We'll see which philosophy keeps more people alive. He dismissed the class, but his eyes found Elena as she gathered her gear. Reeves. My office. Now. Cord's office was sparse. A desk, 2 chairs, and walls covered with maps from every conflict zone of the past 20 years. He closed the door behind them and gestured for Elena to sit. You're making enemies. I'm completing the mission, Sergeant. Same thing in this environment. He sat down behind his desk, studying her. You said you spent 18 months with SEAL Team 7. Observational role only. No official combat training. That's correct. So how did you learn those hand-to-hand techniques? The ones you used to disable 2 armed guards in 15 seconds. Elena met his gaze. I watched. I learned. I practiced in my free time. With who? The question hung in the air. Elena's throat tightened. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Wade. He ran training drills during downtime. Said I should know how to defend myself if things went wrong. Cord's expression shifted slightly. Wade. I knew him. Good operator. Died in an ambush outside Sana 8 months ago. Yes, Sergeant. You were there. It wasn't a question. Elena nodded. I planned the operation. Intelligence gathering mission, minimal risk. I told them exactly where to go, what routes were safe, what the threat assessment looked like. Her voice remained steady, but her hands clenched in her lap. I was wrong. My intelligence missed a cell that had moved into the area the night before. They hit the team during extraction. How many casualties? 3 wounded, 1 killed. Chief Wade died getting the others out. Cord was quiet for a long moment. And now you're here, trying to move from intelligence to combat operations. Trying to become the kind of operator who could have changed the outcome of that mission. I'm here because my intelligence isn't enough anymore. I'm tired of watching other people risk their lives based on my information. If I'm going to send people into danger, I need to be able to go with them. Noble sentiment, but you understand what you're walking into here, right? Bronson isn't wrong about the cultural reality. This is a brotherhood built on shared combat experience. You don't have that. You're an outsider trying to break into a closed system. They will make it hell for you. I know. And you still think you can make it? Elena thought about Marcus Wade, bleeding out in the sand because her intelligence had failed him. She thought about the promise she'd made at his funeral, that she would learn to be the kind of soldier he'd been, so no one else would die because she couldn't go where her intelligence led. I have to, Sergeant. I don't have a choice. Cord nodded slowly. Then here's some free advice. What you did today was impressive. It was also the easy part. Tomorrow, you're going to face Bronson's approach head-to-head. He's going to try to destroy you, and half the class is going to help him do it. The drill I've designed isn't fair, isn't balanced, and isn't meant to showcase your strengths. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to see if you can adapt when the odds are stacked against you. SEAL tactics work in controlled environments. Tomorrow, we're going to see if they work when 47 people want you to fail. He stood, signaling the conversation was over. Get some rest, Reeves. You're going to need it. The barracks were hostile territory. Elena found her assigned bunk in the corner, separated from the main clusters where trainees had already formed tight groups based on prior service connections. She unpacked her gear methodically, aware that every move was being watched. "Hey, analyst girl." She turned. 3 trainees stood behind her, Bronson flanked by 2 others. The name tapes read Marshall and Diaz. "We're having a team meeting tonight. Planning session for tomorrow's exercise. You're not invited." Elena kept her expression neutral. "Understood." "Good. Just wanted to make sure you knew where you stood." Bronson stepped closer, using his size advantage. "What you did today was cute. A nice party trick. But tomorrow you're going to learn what real combat looks like. No ventilation shafts to hide in. No time to be clever. Just you against trained fighters who aren't going to fall for your SEAL cosplay bullshit." "I look forward to it." That wasn't the response Bronson expected. His eyes narrowed. "You think you're tough because you impressed Cord? He's testing you, seeing how long it takes before you crack and quit. Everyone knows you don't belong here. You're a diversity checkbox, nothing more." Elena felt the anger rising but forced it down. Reacting was what he wanted. "If that's what helps you sleep tonight, Bronson." He leaned in close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. "Tomorrow, I'm going to make you look so incompetent that Cord will have no choice but to send you home. And when you're crying on that bus back to whatever desk job you came from, remember, this is what happens when people try to be something they're not." He walked away, Marshall and Diaz following. Within minutes, groups of trainees were clustered throughout the barracks, voices low but animated, planning, strategizing, building the unified front that would crush the outsider. Elena sat on her bunk, alone. Her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "They're going to try to break you tomorrow. Don't let them. You're better than this whole room combined, but you have to make them see it. M.W." Marcus Wade's brother. They'd stayed in contact after the funeral, and Michael Wade had been one of the few people who'd encouraged her transition to combat operations. She texted back, "How?" The response came immediately. "Do what Marcus would do. Make them realize they need you." Elena set down her phone and lay back on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Around her, the barracks buzzed with hostile energy. Tomorrow's exercise would be designed to expose her weaknesses, and she'd be facing it alone against a unified team that wanted nothing more than to see her fail. But as she lay there in the darkness, a plan began forming. Not the plan they expected, not the approach they were prepared for. Something else entirely. By the time she fell asleep, Elena Reeves knew exactly how she was going to turn tomorrow's trap into her greatest victory. The question was whether she'd survive long enough to pull it off. The 0500 wake-up alarm shattered the tense silence in the barracks. Elena had been awake for an hour already, running through scenarios in her mind. Around her, the other trainees moved with the practiced efficiency of men who'd done this 1,000 times before. No one spoke to her. No one looked at her. She might as well have been invisible. "Gear up in 15, formation in 20. Master Sergeant Cord's voice boomed through the intercom. "Today we separate the thinkers from the failures." Elena pulled on her combat gear, checking each piece of equipment with methodical precision. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. Whatever Cord had planned, it was designed to expose her. Bronson and his allies would make sure of it. "Hey, Reeves." She turned. A trainee she hadn't spoken to before stood a few feet away. His name tape read, Chen. He was smaller than most of the others, wiry rather than massive, with intelligent eyes that held something different from the hostility she'd grown accustomed to. "Yeah?" What you did yesterday, the ventilation shaft approach, that was smart. Elena waited for the punchline, the insult that always followed any apparent compliment. I mean it, Chen continued quietly. I've been trying to tell these guys for weeks that there's more than one way to solve a problem. They don't listen. Maybe they'll listen to you. I wouldn't count on it. Chen glanced over his shoulder, making sure no one was paying attention. Bronson's planning something. I heard him and Marshall talking last night. They're going to make sure you can't succeed today, no matter what you do. I know. And you're still going through with it? Elena shouldered her rifle. I don't have a choice. Quitting means Marcus Wade died for nothing. Means I'll never be able to look myself in the mirror again. So yeah, I'm going through with it. Chen nodded slowly. If you need someone who isn't actively trying to destroy you, I'm here. It was the first genuine offer of support Elena had received since arriving at Fort Sentinel. She felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Thanks, Chen. I'll remember that. The formation outside was brutal. Arizona's sun already beating down at 0520 hours, temperature climbing toward what would be a scorching day. 48 trainees stood in perfect rows while Cord paced in front of them like a predator selecting prey. Urban warfare scenario. Building 12. 3 stories, multiple rooms, civilian presence throughout. Your mission is to neutralize hostile forces while protecting innocent lives. He stopped pacing and faced them directly. Here's the twist. You're not working as one unit. We're splitting you into 2 teams. Team Alpha, led by Bronson. Team Bravo, led by Reeves. Elena's stomach dropped. She'd expected to be isolated, to face the exercise alone. But this was worse. This meant choosing teams, and she knew exactly how that would go. Team leaders, step forward and select your squads. Alternating picks. Bronson, you're first. Bronson grinned. Marshall. Reeves. Elena scanned the faces in front of her. 46 people who'd spent the last 24 hours deciding she didn't belong. She made her choice based on the only real data point she had. Chen. Bronson's second pick was Diaz. His third was Rodriguez, a former Marine with a reputation for aggressive tactics. Each selection was strategic, pulling the most experienced and most physically imposing trainees onto his team. Elena's choices were more desperate. She picked Sullivan, a quiet trainee from Montana she'd barely spoken to. Then Ramirez, who at least hadn't openly participated in the hostility. By the time the selection process ended, the division was stark. Bronson had 24 trainees, the biggest, the strongest, the most experienced. Elena had 23, and most of them looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Team Alpha, you're defending the building, Cord announced. You have 30 minutes to fortify positions and prepare for assault. Team Bravo, you're attacking. Your objective is to clear all hostile forces and secure the civilians within 45 minutes. Simulation rounds only, but they'll hurt like hell if you get hit. Casualties stay down until medical clearance. Bronson turned to his team, voice carrying deliberately. This is going to be easy, boys. We set up proper defensive positions, create kill zones in the stairwells, and wait for them to walk into a meat grinder. Reeves doesn't have the experience or the manpower to break through real military defense. Dismissed! 30 minutes starts now. As Bronson's team jogged toward Building 12, Elena gathered her own squad. 23 faces stared at her with varying degrees of skepticism and resignation. Listen up, she said, keeping her voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. I know most of you don't want to be on this team. I know you think we're going to lose. But I'm going to tell you something that might change your mind. This should be good, muttered Sullivan. Bronson is setting up a conventional defense because that's what he knows. Fortified positions, kill zones, overwhelming firepower at choke points. It's textbook, and it works against conventional assault. Elena pulled out a tablet and called up the building schematics. But we're not going to give him a conventional assault. What are we giving him? Chen asked. Chaos, confusion, and an attack from angles he's not defending because he doesn't think we're capable of reaching them. She pointed to the building schematic, highlighting areas Bronson would consider inaccessible. The roof has maintenance access through an external service ladder on the west side. The basement connects to the building's old storm drainage system. The loading dock has a cargo elevator that most people forget about because it's been broken for 2 years. How do you know all this? Ramirez asked. I spent last night studying every building on this base, their histories, their infrastructure, their vulnerabilities. Because that's what intelligence specialists do. We find information other people miss. For the first time, she saw interest flicker across some faces. Here's the plan. We split into 3 elements. Chen, you take 8 people through the drainage system. Come up through the basement and hold position. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary. Chen nodded, already studying the schematics. Sullivan, you take 7 and scale the west side to the roof. The cargo elevator shaft has an emergency ladder. You can rappel down to any floor once you're in position. Sullivan looked skeptical, but didn't argue. I'll take the remaining 7 through the main entrance. We're going to be loud, aggressive, and completely obvious. That's suicide, someone said. They'll tear us apart. That's the point. While Bronson's entire team is focused on stopping my frontal assault, Chen hits them from below, and Sullivan drops in from above. By the time they realize they're fighting on 3 fronts, we've already secured the civilians and neutralized half their force. That's insane, Ramirez said. But he was smiling. That's absolutely insane. It's asymmetric warfare. SEALs use it all the time. Make the enemy think they know what you're doing, then hit them where they're not looking. What if it doesn't work? Sullivan asked. Elena met his eyes. Then we lose. But if we try to beat Bronson at his own game, using his tactics and his playbook, we lose anyway. This is our only chance. Chen stepped forward. I'm in. Let's show these assholes what thinking looks like. The next 30 minutes were controlled chaos. Elena divided her team, briefed each element on their specific roles, and synchronized timing down to the second. The plan required precision and trust, and she wasn't sure she had enough of either. Remember, she told them as they moved into position, this only works if we commit completely. No hesitation, no second guessing. When the shooting starts, you execute your piece of the plan and trust everyone else to execute theirs. Easy for you to say, Sullivan muttered. You've never actually done this in combat. You're right, I haven't. But I've watched the best operators in the world do it 100 times. I've studied their mistakes and their successes. And I know this plan works because it's based on proven tactics, not ego. The timer hit 0. Cord's voice crackled over the radio. Exercise is live. Team Bravo, you are clear to assault. Elena's 7-person element approached the main entrance of Building 12 at a measured pace. Through the windows, she could see movement. Bronson's team was positioned exactly where she'd predicted. Second-floor stairwell, first-floor corridors, defensive positions covering every conventional approach. On my mark, we hit the door hard and fast. Maximum noise, maximum aggression. Draw every eye in the building. She counted down from 3. On 0, they breached the entrance with a flashbang and poured through the doorway. Simulation rounds immediately filled the air. Elena's team returned fire, deliberately aiming high and wild, creating chaos without committing to actual engagement. The noise was deafening. Fall back! Fall back! Elena shouted, making sure Bronson's team could hear her over the gunfire. They've got the entrance locked down! It was exactly what Bronson expected to hear. Through the smoke and chaos, Elena caught a glimpse of him on the second-floor landing, directing his forces to press the advantage, to pour more firepower into the entrance and eliminate the attacking force before they could establish a foothold. Which meant he wasn't watching the basement or the roof. Chen's voice came through her earpiece. "We're in position, basement level, 0 contact." Then Sullivan. "Roof access secured. Ready to descend on your signal." Elena's team continued their staged retreat, keeping Bronson's attention fixed on the main entrance. She could see his tactical mind working, deploying more defenders to the ground floor, thinning out positions elsewhere in the building. "Now," Elena whispered into her radio. "Hit them now!" Chen's team erupted from the basement stairwell like a tidal wave, catching Bronson's defenders from behind. Simultaneously, Sullivan's element rappelled down the cargo elevator shaft and burst into the second floor, directly into the command position where Bronson was directing his forces. The confusion was immediate and total. Defenders spun around, trying to engage threats from multiple directions. Friendly fire incidents eliminated 3 of Bronson's own team in the first 30 seconds. Command and control collapsed as Bronson tried to coordinate defense against 3 separate assault vectors at once. Elena's team at the main entrance stopped retreating and pushed forward into the chaos. "Civilians are in the north wing, 2nd floor," she called to her team. "Chen, secure the route. Sullivan, cover the extraction." The next 5 minutes were controlled violence. Elena's team moved with surprising cohesion, each element supporting the others. They weren't fighting as individuals anymore. They were functioning as an integrated unit, just like she'd promised. Bronson appeared in front of her, simulation rifle raised. His face was red with fury and disbelief. "You cheating bitch. You planned this whole thing." Elena's weapon was already aimed at his center mass. "I executed a coordinated assault using available intelligence and tactical creativity. You know, the things they're supposed to be teaching us here?" She pulled the trigger. The simulation round hit him square in the chest. The impact sensor on his vest lit up red. Casualty status confirmed. "You're dead, Bronson. Stand down." He stared at her for a long moment, rage and something else warring in his expression. Then he lowered his weapon and stepped aside. 22 minutes after the assault began, Elena's team emerged from Building 12 with all civilians secured and 70% of Bronson's defending force eliminated. Her own casualties were minimal, 3 wounded, 0 killed. Master Sergeant Cord stood waiting, stopwatch in hand. "Explain." Elena removed her helmet. "Conventional assault against a fortified position has an 80% failure rate, so I didn't use a conventional assault. I created a multi-vector attack that divided enemy attention and exploited weaknesses in their defensive coverage." "You used SEAL tactics." "I used SMART tactics, Sergeant. The SEALs didn't invent asymmetric warfare. They just perfected it." Cord looked past her to where Bronson's team was emerging from the building, faces showing shock and anger in equal measure. "Bronson, your defense had every advantage. More personnel, better positioning, home field advantage. How did you lose in under 23 minutes? Bronson's jaw was clenched so tight Elena thought it might crack. "She didn't fight fair." "Fair?" Cord's voice could have cut steel. "You think the enemy fights fair? You think terrorists give a damn about your tactical preferences?" He turned to address both teams. "Reeves won because she understood something the rest of you missed. War isn't about being the strongest or the toughest. It's about being the smartest. It's about making your enemy defend against the attack you're not actually making." The praise felt hollow to Elena. She could see the hatred crystallizing in the eyes of Bronson's team. She hadn't just won. She'd humiliated them. And that was far more dangerous than simple defeat. "Dismissed. Lunch break. Then we reconvene for hand-to-hand combat drills at 1300 hours. As the teams dispersed, Chen approached Elena with a cautious smile. That was incredible. I've never seen anything like that in actual training. Thanks for trusting the plan. I didn't have much choice, but I'm glad I did. He lowered his voice. You should know, though, Bronson isn't going to let this go. You made him look incompetent in front of everyone. He's going to come after you hard. I know. And most of the guys on our team? They're still not on your side. They helped you win, but they don't respect you yet. Today proved you can plan. Hand-to-hand this afternoon will test if you can actually fight. Elena watched Bronson stalking toward the barracks, surrounded by his core supporters. They were already talking, already planning. The victory she'd just won had bought her credibility, but it had also painted a target on her back that was visible from space. Then I guess I'd better prove I can fight. The mess hall at lunch was segregated like a prison yard. Bronson's supporters clustered at one end, shooting hostile glares toward anyone who'd been on Elena's team. Chen, Sullivan, and Ramirez sat with Elena, but the conversation was stilted, uncomfortable. You really think you can take him in hand-to-hand? Sullivan asked, keeping his voice low. He outweighs you by 90 pounds. He's got 6 inches of reach, and he's been in real combat. I've been training in Krav Maga for 3 years, Elena said, pushing food around her plate without eating. And I spent 6 months learning combatives from a Navy SEAL who'd survived more fights than Bronson's been in. Krav Maga is fine for self-defense, Ramirez said, but this isn't self-defense. Bronson's going to try to hurt you, badly. He needs to re-establish dominance, and the only way he knows how to do that is through physical violence. Chen nodded. He's been talking to Marshall and Diaz. They're planning something. I don't know what, but it's not just a fair fight. Nothing about this place is fair, Elena replied. I figured that out on day 1. At 12:55 hours, the trainees assembled in the combatives training area, a large mat surrounded by padding, designed to look like a boxing ring, but without the ropes. Master Sergeant Cord stood at the center, arms crossed. Hand-to-hand combat is the oldest form of warfare, and often the most decisive. When everything else fails, when you're out of ammunition and out of options, your body becomes your weapon. He gestured to the mat. Today, you're going to learn who can actually use that weapon. He pulled out a roster. Matches will be 3 minutes. Submission or incapacitation ends the fight. No eye gouging, no groin strikes. Everything else is fair game. He looked directly at Elena. First match, Bronson versus Reeves. The room erupted in shouts and jeers. This was what they'd been waiting for, the chance to see the outsider get destroyed. Elena stepped onto the mat. Bronson followed, rolling his shoulders and cracking his knuckles with theatrical menace. Cord stepped between them. This is training, not personal vendetta. Control your aggression. Understood? Understood, Sergeant, Bronson said, but his eyes told a different story. Elena said nothing. She was remembering every lesson Marcus Wade had drilled into her during those late-night training sessions in Yemen. Size doesn't matter if you know where to strike. Strength is irrelevant if you control balance. Aggression can be redirected and used against itself. Ready? Fight! Bronson came at her like a freight train, using his size advantage to try for an immediate takedown. Elena sidestepped at the last possible second, letting his momentum carry him past her. She landed a sharp elbow strike to his kidney as he went by. He roared and spun, faster than she'd expected for someone his size. His fist came at her face with devastating force. Elena ducked under it and swept his forward leg. He stumbled but didn't fall, his superior mass keeping him upright. "Stand and trade, coward!" he shouted. Elena ignored the taunt. Trading blows with someone who outweighed her by 90 pounds was suicide. Instead, she circled, looking for openings, waiting for him to overcommit. He lunged again, this time going for a grapple. His hands were massive, and if he got a solid grip on her, the fight would be over. Elena dropped low, drove her shoulder into his midsection, and used his own momentum to throw him over her back. Bronson hit the mat hard. The impact would have stunned a smaller man, but he rolled through it and came up swinging. A backhand caught Elena across the jaw. Stars exploded in her vision. She tasted blood. The crowd of trainees erupted in cheers. This was what they'd wanted to see, the analyst girl getting taught a lesson about real combat. Elena staggered back, her head ringing. Bronson pressed his advantage, throwing a combination of punches that drove her toward the edge of the mat. She blocked most of them, but one got through and slammed into her ribs. Pain lanced through her side. "Not so smart now, are you?" Bronson growled, closing in for the finish. That's when Elena stopped retreating. She'd been studying his patterns, his timing, his tells. He favored his right hand. He dropped his guard slightly after big punches. And he was getting tired. All that mass required enormous amounts of oxygen, and his breathing was already labored. Marcus Wade's voice echoed in her memory. "When they think they've won, that's when you end it." Bronson threw another haymaker. Elena caught his wrist, twisted her body, and used a textbook Krav Maga technique to hyperextend his elbow while simultaneously sweeping his legs. He went down hard, and before he could recover, she had him in an armbar that would snap his elbow if he didn't tap out. He held out for 5 seconds, pride warring with pain. Then his hand slapped the mat 3 times. The cheering stopped as if someone had cut the audio. Elena released him immediately and stood up. Her jaw throbbed where he'd hit her, and her ribs screamed with each breath. But she'd won. Cord nodded approvingly. Match to Reeves. Next up, Marshall versus Chen. Bronson slowly got to his feet, cradling his arm. The look he gave Elena was pure hatred. "This isn't over," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "Not even close." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "I know." The remaining matches proceeded with brutal efficiency. Chen surprised everyone by submitting Marshall in under 2 minutes, using leverage-based techniques that neutralized the size advantage. Sullivan lost to Rodriguez but made him work for it. Ramirez dominated his opponent with wrestling skills honed in high school. But the afternoon's real drama came during the final match of the day. "Reeves versus Diaz," Cord announced. Diaz was one of Bronson's closest allies, a former Army Ranger with a reputation for vicious fighting. He stepped onto the mat with murder in his eyes. The fight was faster and meaner than Elena's bout with Bronson. Diaz didn't rely on size. He used speed and technique, forcing Elena to defend constantly. He landed several solid strikes that left bruises she'd feel for weeks. But he also underestimated her resilience. Every time he thought he had her finished, she recovered and countered. The fight went the full 3 minutes without a submission, and when it ended, both of them were bleeding and exhausted. "Draw," Cord announced. Both fighters showed competence. It felt like a loss to Elena. She'd wanted a clear victory, something that would silence the doubters permanently. Instead, she'd only proven she could survive. As they filed out of the training area, Chen fell into step beside her. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." "You're limping and holding your ribs. That's not fine." Elena didn't respond. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the pain was becoming harder to ignore. "Medical check is mandatory after combat training," Chen reminded her. "You can't hide injuries here." The medical facility confirmed what Elena already knew. 2 cracked ribs, significant bruising, and a mild concussion from Bronson's backhand. The doctor, a no-nonsense army captain, looked at her with something between respect and concern. "You should take tomorrow off. Rest and recovery. Can't. I'll fall behind. You'll fall a lot further behind if those ribs puncture something vital during tomorrow's ruck march. Elena shook her head. Wrap them tight. I'll manage. The doctor sighed but complied. Your funeral, or hospital stay more likely. By the time she returned to the barracks, word had spread about her injuries. The atmosphere had shifted again. Some trainees looked at her with grudging respect for fighting through pain, others with satisfaction that she was wounded and weakened. Bronson sat on his bunk, surrounded by Marshall, Diaz, and 3 others. They watched her enter with predatory interest. Heard you got cracked ribs, Bronson called out. That's going to make tomorrow's 20-mile ruck march real interesting. Elena ignored him and headed for her own bunk. Chen and Sullivan were already there. We heard, Sullivan said quietly. 20 miles with full gear and cracked ribs? That's brutal even for someone in perfect health. I'll handle it. You don't have to do this alone, Chen said. We can help. Take some of your gear weight. Set a pace that's manageable. That's against regulations. You'd get recycled for helping me. Screw regulations, Sullivan said, surprising Elena. What you did today, both in the urban warfare exercise and in hand-to-hand, that earned my respect. I'm not going to stand by and watch Bronson destroy you just because you're injured. Ramirez appeared behind them. He's right. We're a team now, whether the rest of these assholes admit it or not. Teams don't leave people behind. Elena felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Not because she thought she could make it through tomorrow without help, but because for the first time since arriving at Fort Sentinel, she wasn't completely alone. Thank you, she said quietly. But if we're going to do this, we do it smart. No obvious rule violations. We work as a unit, pace ourselves, and make sure everyone crosses the finish line together. Even if that means you don't finish first? Chen asked. Finishing first doesn't matter if your team collapses behind you. Marcus Wade taught me that. The mission is everything. Individual glory is nothing. They spent the next hour planning for the ruck march, mapping out water points, discussing gear distribution, and establishing communication signals. By lights out, they had a strategy that might actually work. But as Elena lay in her bunk, ribs throbbing with every breath, she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would break her. 20 miles with cracked ribs and a concussion wasn't just difficult, it was potentially impossible. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Michael Wade. Marcus used to say that the body quits long before the mind does. Tomorrow, prove him right. Elena closed her eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that in less than 6 hours, she'd face the hardest physical test of her life. The question wasn't whether she'd suffer. That was guaranteed. The question was whether she'd survive it. The 0400 alarm cut through the darkness like a blade. Elena's body screamed in protest as she sat up, every muscle stiff, her ribs a constant source of agony that intensified with each breath. She'd slept maybe 90 minutes total, pain and anxiety keeping her awake through most of the night. Around her, the barracks came alive with movement. She forced herself to stand, biting down on the groan that wanted to escape. Showing weakness now would be fatal. You look like hell, Chen said quietly, appearing beside her bunk with 2 ibuprofen and a water bottle. Take these. Don't argue. Elena swallowed the pills, knowing they'd barely touch the pain, but grateful for the gesture. Across the room, Bronson was watching her with predatory satisfaction. 20 miles, Reeves. Full combat load. Think you can handle it with those busted ribs? Guess we'll find out. Guess we will. He turned to his crew. I'm thinking we set a pace around 4 miles per hour. Really push it. Separate the strong from the weak. Marshall grinned. Sounds perfect. Medical van will be picking up casualties by mile 8. Elena finished gearing up, each movement deliberate and controlled. The ruck weighed 65 pounds, standard combat load. With her ribs compromised, it might as well have been 200. Sullivan approached with his own ruck. I've got some of your weight redistributed into mine. MREs, water, some of the heavier gear. You're carrying about 48 pounds now instead of 65. Sullivan, if they catch you, they won't. I packed it smart. Looks regulation from the outside. He lowered his voice. You saved my ass in that urban warfare drill. I'm returning the favor. The formation outside was brutal. Master Sergeant Cord stood at the front, flanked by 2 medic vehicles and 3 instructor cadre who would shadow the march in Humvees. 20 miles through the desert, full combat load. You fall more than 200 meters behind the main group, you're out. You fail to complete the course in under 6 hours, you're out. You quit, you're out. Cord's eyes swept across them. Approximately 30% of you won't finish. The question is, which 30%? He raised his hand. Move out. The first mile was manageable. The group moved together, finding a rhythm. Ina positioned herself in the middle of her small alliance. Chen ahead, Sullivan and Ramirez behind, creating a protective pocket that shielded her from immediate scrutiny. But by mile 2, Bronson started pushing the pace. He moved to the front of the formation and increased speed, forcing everyone to match or fall behind. Elena felt her ribs protest with every step, each impact sending pain radiating through her torso. He's doing this deliberately, Sullivan muttered behind her, trying to break you early. I know. Elena focused on her breathing, on maintaining pace, on not showing the agony that threatened to overwhelm her. Mile 3 brought the first casualty. A trainee named Patterson stumbled, fell, and couldn't get back up. The heat was already oppressive, climbing toward 90 degrees even this early in the morning. The medic vehicle pulled alongside and loaded him in. 1 down, 47 to go, Bronson announced cheerfully. Let's pick it up, people. By mile 5, Elena's vision was starting to blur at the edges. The pain in her ribs had evolved from sharp and localized to a deep, grinding agony that made every breath feel like knives. Sweat poured down her face, salt stinging her eyes. Talk to me, Reeves. Chen had fallen back to walk beside her. You still with us? Yeah. The word came out as a gasp. Your breathing's wrong. You're taking shallow breaths because of the ribs. You're not getting enough oxygen. Can't breathe deep. Hurts too much. Chen thought for a moment. Then we need to slow your pace. Make each step count for more. Less impact, more efficiency. He demonstrated a modified walking technique, shorter stride, rolling through the foot differently, using momentum more than muscle. It looked awkward, but when Elena tried it, the impact on her ribs decreased slightly. Better? Chen asked. Better. It was still agonizing, but marginally more sustainable. Mile 6 claimed 3 more trainees. The heat was savage now, and the desert terrain had shifted from flat hardpan to rolling hills that added elevation gain to the torture. Bronson's group at the front was pulling away, opening a gap between the leaders and the stragglers. Let them go, Ramirez said. We maintain our pace. Finishing is what matters, not finishing first. But Elena could see the calculation in Bronson's strategy. If he could open enough distance, create enough separation between his group and hers, it would look like her team was failing. It would reinforce the narrative that she was weak, that following her leadership was a losing proposition. No, she said through gritted teeth. We close the gap. We stay with the main group. Elena, that's suicide. You can barely walk as it is. Then help me run. Chen and Sullivan exchanged glances. Then, without a word, They moved to either side of her, not touching, that would be too obvious, but close enough that their presence provided psychological support and physical shielding. "On 3, Chen said. "We pick up to a shuffle. Not a run, not a walk, something in between." They accelerated together. The pain in Elena's ribs exploded into something beyond description, but she forced her legs to keep moving. Step after step after step, closing the distance to Bronson's group meter by agonizing meter. By mile 7, they'd rejoined the main formation. Bronson looked back, saw Elena still standing, and his expression darkened. "How the hell is she still moving?" Marshall asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Adrenaline," Bronson replied. "She'll crash soon. They always do." But mile 8 came and went, and Elena didn't crash. She wanted to. Every cell in her body was screaming for her to stop, to quit, to let the medic vehicle pick her up and end this torture. But she kept moving, because stopping meant Marcus Wade had died for nothing. Stopping meant admitting Bronson was right about her. Stopping meant failure. Mile 9 brought a water station. The formation halted for mandatory hydration. Elena's hands shook as she grabbed her canteen, and she could barely lift it to her lips. Chen steadied it for her, pretending to adjust his own gear while actually helping her drink. "You're going into shock," he said quietly. "Your skin is gray. You need to stop." "Can't." "Elena, I'm serious. You could die out here." "Then I die." She met his eyes. "I'm not quitting. I'd rather die than give Bronson the satisfaction." Cord's voice cut through the break. 2 minutes remaining. Prepare to move." As Elena struggled to get her ruck resettled on her shoulders, Bronson appeared in front of her. Up close, she could see he was barely sweating, barely affected by the march at all. "You're tough, I'll give you that. Tougher than I expected." He leaned in close. "But you're also stupid. You think suffering through this proves something? All it proves is that you don't know when to quit. And soldiers who don't know when to quit get other people killed. Soldiers who quit at the first sign of difficulty never accomplish anything worth doing." Bronson's smile was cold. "We'll see how philosophical you feel at mile 15. That's where the real suffering starts." He was right. Mile 15 was where Elena's body began to completely shut down. The pain in her ribs had spread to her entire torso, radiating outward until she couldn't tell where the injury ended and general agony began. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else, moving through some autonomous process she no longer controlled. "Stay with me, Elena." Sullivan's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Just 5 more miles. You can do 5 more miles." Could she? Elena wasn't sure anymore. The desert had become an endless expanse of suffering, each step identical to the last, time losing all meaning. Mile 16 claimed 5 more trainees in rapid succession. The attrition rate was accelerating as bodies gave out and minds broke. The formation had fractured into distinct groups, Bronson's leaders at the front, a struggling middle pack, and a desperate rear guard that was barely maintaining the minimum pace. Elena's group was in the middle pack, but sliding backward. "We're losing ground," Ramirez reported. "Another 100 meters, and we hit the cutoff distance." "Can't go faster," Elena gasped. "Then we need to do something else," Chen was thinking, his mind working through the problem. "The cutoff is measured from the front of the formation to the back. If we can make the front group slow down, even marginally, it buys us space." "How do we make them slow down?" Sullivan asked. "We don't, but nature might." Chen pointed ahead to where the route curved through a narrow wash. The instructor's Humvees would have to navigate carefully through the tight space, which meant the formation would have to slow and potentially compress. If we time it right, hit that section when the front group is through, but before we're too far behind, the natural slowdown will let us close distance. It was a gamble, but they were out of better options. They maintained their agonizing pace, watching the terrain, waiting for the moment. The front group entered the wash. The formation slowed. Chen made the call. Now! Push now! Elena didn't think she had anything left, but somehow her body found reserves she didn't know existed. They accelerated into a stumbling run, closing the gap as the formation compressed through the narrow passage. When they emerged on the far side, they'd regained position in the middle pack and bought themselves precious buffer distance from the cutoff. But the effort cost Elena dearly. Her vision tunneled, black spots dancing at the edges. She stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. "I've got you." Ramirez was there, his hand briefly steadying her elbow. 2 more miles, that's it, just 2 more. Mile 18 was where Elena stopped being fully conscious. She was aware of movement, of putting one foot in front of the other, but the world had reduced to a narrow tunnel of pain and determination. Voices spoke around her, but the words were meaningless. Somewhere in the haze, she heard Cord's voice over a loudspeaker. "Final 2 miles. This is where you prove what you're made of." Marcus Wade's voice echoed in her memory from one of their last conversations before he died. "Pain is just information, Elena. Your body telling you it's working hard. You don't have to listen to it. You just have to acknowledge it and keep moving." She kept moving. Mile 19 brought the final major hill climb. The route ascended a steep grade that had been relatively easy on fresh legs at the beginning of the march. Now, with bodies destroyed and minds barely functioning, it was a wall of suffering. Elena watched trainees ahead of her fall. Strong men who'd seemed invincible hours earlier, now broken and defeated, sitting in the dirt, waiting for the medical vehicle. "Come on, analyst girl," Bronson's voice from somewhere above her on the hill. "Show us that SEAL training, or is that busted ribs excuse getting old?" Elena didn't respond. Couldn't respond. She focused everything she had on the next step, then the next, then the next. Chen and Sullivan had moved into position on either side of her again, creating a psychological shield. They couldn't help her physically, that would be too obvious, but their presence gave her something to focus on besides the pain. "My sister ran a marathon once," Chen said, his voice cutting through Elena's fog. "She told me that around mile 20, your body starts shutting down non-essential systems. It's trying to protect you by forcing you to stop. But here's the thing. Your mind gets to decide what's essential. And right now, getting to the top of this hill is the most essential thing in the world." Elena's foot slipped on loose gravel. She went down to one knee, the impact sending an explosion of agony through her ribs. For a moment, the world went completely white. "Get up!" Sullivan's voice, urgent but not panicked. "Elena, get up! You're too close to quit now." She forced herself upright. Blood roared in her ears. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip her rifle. "1 more mile," Ramirez said. "That's all. 1 mile downhill. You can coast to the finish." The summit of the hill revealed the final stretch, a long, gradual descent back to the base. In the distance, perhaps a mile away, Elena could see the finish line. Bronson's group was already approaching it, their pace still strong despite the brutal march. "They're going to make it look easy," Sullivan said bitterly. "Going to cross that line like they were out for a morning jog." "Let them," Elena whispered. Her voice was raw, barely recognizable. "Let them have their moment." She started down the hill. Gravity helped, but it also accelerated her pace beyond what her destroyed body could safely handle. She stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. Her ribs had gone from screaming pain to a dull, dangerous numbness that probably meant something was seriously wrong. Half a mile to go. Elena could see individual faces at the finish line now, instructors with clipboards, medics standing by, and Bronson, who had crossed first, standing with his arms crossed and a triumphant smile on his face. Quarter mile. Elena's legs were barely responding to commands. Each step was an independent act of will, her body fighting her mind's determination to continue. "You're going to make it," Chen said beside her. "Elena, you're actually going to make it." 100 meters. The finish line was close enough to read the banner stretched across it. Elena's vision was fading at the edges, consciousness flickering like a candle in wind. 50 meters. She could hear cheering, though she couldn't tell if it was for her or mocking her. Didn't matter. Nothing mattered except crossing that line. 20 meters. Bronson's voice cut through the noise. "Look at her. Can barely walk, and you want us to follow her leadership?" 10 meters. Elena's right leg gave out completely. She pitched forward, heading for a face-first collision with the desert floor. Chen and Sullivan caught her, one on each side, and half-carried, half-dragged her across the finish line. The moment she crossed, Elena's legs completely stopped functioning. She would have collapsed if Chen and Sullivan weren't holding her upright. Medics rushed forward immediately. "We need a stretcher here." "Possible internal bleeding. Get her to medical now." Everything was happening very fast and very far away. Elena was aware of being lowered onto a stretcher, of movement, of voices speaking urgently above her, but the details were lost in the fog of pain and exhaustion. 5 hours, 41 minutes, she heard Cord's voice say. Reeves completed the course, with 2 cracked ribs and a concussion. The last thing Elena saw before consciousness left her completely was Bronson's face. The triumph had vanished, replaced by something she couldn't quite identify. Respect? Fear? Uncertainty? Then the world went black. She woke up in the medical facility with an IV in her arm and a doctor standing over her looking extremely unhappy. "You're an idiot," the doctor said without preamble. A tough idiot, but an idiot nonetheless. Elena tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. The doctor held a cup of water to her lips. "Small sips. Your body is severely dehydrated. You've got 2 cracked ribs that you managed to turn into 3 cracked ribs and a fractured sternum. You're also suffering from heat exhaustion, muscle breakdown, and what I'm fairly certain is early-stage rhabdomyolysis." "Did I finish?" "You finished. Barely. If your friends hadn't been there to literally carry you across the line, you'd be looking at a medical discharge right now." The doctor's expression softened slightly. "But yes, officially, you completed the ruck march. You and 31 others. 17 dropped out or were medically evacuated." Elena processed this through the haze of exhaustion and medication. 32 finishers out of 48 starters. She'd survived. How long was I out? 6 hours. It's 1900 hours now. You missed afternoon training, dinner, and the evening briefing. Master Sergeant Cord has ordered you to remain here overnight for observation. Tomorrow, you're cleared to return to duty, against my strong medical advice. The door opened, and Chen entered, followed by Sullivan and Ramirez. They looked exhausted, but mobile, in far better shape than Elena. "She awake?" Chen asked the doctor. "Unfortunately, and already asking about getting back to training, which tells me she hasn't learned anything from today's near-death experience." The doctor stood. "You have 15 minutes, then she needs to rest." When the doctor left, Chen pulled up a chair beside Elena's bed. "You scared the hell out of us. We thought you were going to die right there at the finish line." "Sorry," Elena managed. Don't apologize. What you did today was insane, but it was also the most badass thing I've ever seen. Sullivan was grinning. You know what they're calling you in the barracks? The ghost, because apparently you should have been dead 3 times during that march, but you just kept walking. Bronson's not happy about it, Ramirez added. He finished first, made it look easy, and nobody cares. Everyone's talking about you instead. About how you refused to quit even when quitting was the rational choice. Elena closed her eyes. I didn't do it to be badass. I did it because I didn't have a choice. That's what makes it matter, Chen said quietly. You didn't do it for glory or recognition. You did it because giving up wasn't something you could live with. That's the kind of leadership people actually follow. The barracks dynamics have shifted, Sullivan reported. It's not as hostile anymore. People are still skeptical, but there's respect now. Even some of Bronson's core supporters are starting to question whether his approach is the only valid one. What about Cord? What did he say? The 3 men exchanged glances. Ramirez spoke first. He said that in 20 years of running this program, he's never seen anyone finish a ruck march with injuries like yours. He also said that what you did was either the bravest or stupidest thing he's witnessed, and he hasn't decided which yet. Elena felt sleep pulling at her again. The medications were winning the battle against consciousness. There's one more thing, Chen said. Cord announced tomorrow's training schedule during the briefing you missed. It's a week-long field exercise, full tactical scenario, live in the desert, no support infrastructure. Teams of 8, and we get to choose our own teams. Elena's eyes opened. When do we choose? Tomorrow morning, 0600. But here's the thing. Cord's making team leaders submit their rosters tonight by 2100 hours. You're going to miss the deadline. Then you choose, Elena said. Chen, you lead team selection. Pick whoever you think gives us the best chance. You trust me to do that? You've earned it. All of you have. After they left, Elena lay in the medical facility bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about how much had changed in just 3 days. She'd arrived as an outsider, been actively sabotaged, fought her way through impossible challenges, and was now, apparently, someone people respected enough to follow into a week-long field exercise. But she also understood that respect built on suffering wasn't the same as respect built on competence. Tomorrow's field exercise would test everything: tactics, leadership, teamwork, and whether the small alliance she'd built could survive a week in the desert against Bronson's more experienced team. Her phone buzzed. Michael Wade again. Marcus would be proud. Not of the suffering, he'd call you an idiot for that, but of the refusal to quit. That's what separates the good ones from the great ones. Elena texted back, Am I great or just stubborn? The response came immediately. The great ones are always stubborn. That's the secret nobody tells you. She fell asleep with that thought, her body broken, but her spirit somehow stronger than it had been when the day started. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, new opportunities to prove that unconventional thinking could match or exceed traditional military approaches. But tonight, Elena Reeves could finally rest, knowing she'd survived something that should have destroyed her. And in the brutal mathematics of Fort Sentinel, survival was its own form of victory. The real question was whether she could survive what came next. The medical facility released Elena at 0530 hours with enough painkillers to drop a horse and strict orders to avoid strenuous activity. She ignored both the pills and the orders, reporting to formation with her ribs wrapped so tight she could barely breathe. Chen met her outside the barracks with a tablet showing the team roster he'd submitted. I picked based on capability and willingness to follow unconventional tactics. We've got Sullivan, Ramirez, and 5 others who proved themselves during the urban warfare drill. It's not the biggest team, but it's solid. Elena scanned the names. Martinez made the cut? He asked to join. Said watching you finish that ruck march changed his perspective on what constitutes real strength. Chen hesitated. There's something else you should know. Bronson's team is stacked. He's got Marshall, Diaz, Rodriguez, and every other heavy hitter in the class. 16 people total. Wait, 16? Teams are supposed to be 8 maximum. Cord changed the rules last night. Said teams can be any size as long as total personnel doesn't exceed 32. It's clearly designed to let people choose sides. Elena understood immediately. This wasn't just a field exercise. It was a referendum on leadership philosophy. Conventional versus unconventional. Bronson's overwhelming force against her asymmetric approach. How many are on our team? 8. Everyone else either joined Bronson or formed a third team led by a guy named Patterson. 12 people who don't want to commit to either approach. Master Sergeant Cord's voice cut through the dawn air. Listen up. The field exercise begins in 30 minutes. You'll be dropped at separate coordinates 20 miles apart. Your objective is to locate and secure a high-value target somewhere in a 60-square-mile operational area. First team to bring the HVT back to base wins. There are no rules beyond standard ROE. No outside support, no resupply. You survive on what you carry and what you can scrounge. He paused, his eyes sweeping across the formation. The HVT is being played by a former Delta Force operator who will actively evade capture. He's armed, he's dangerous, and he knows this terrain better than any of you. This is not a training exercise. This is as close to real combat as we can make it without actual bullets. Bronson raised his hand. What about engagement between teams? You're all playing for the same objective. If your paths cross, handle it however you see fit within ROE. Simulation rounds only, but casualties will be treated as real. If you get hit, you're out for the duration. Elena felt her stomach tighten. Cord had essentially created a 3-way competition where the teams could eliminate each other before ever reaching the primary target. Bronson's larger force gave him a massive advantage in any direct confrontation. Vehicles are staged. Move out. The ride to the drop point was silent. Elena's team of 8 sat in the back of a transport truck, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Martinez spoke. We're outnumbered 2-1 by Bronson's team. If we run into them, we're done. Then we don't run into them, Elena replied. We use what they think is our weakness, small size, limited firepower, as our strength. We move faster, quieter, smarter. And if that doesn't work, asked Williams, one of the new additions to the team, then we adapt. That's what we do. The truck stopped in the middle of nowhere. Red rock canyons stretched in every direction, broken by clusters of desert scrub and the occasional boulder field. The driver opened the back. This is your stop. Good luck. They climbed out into heat that was already oppressive. The truck disappeared in a cloud of dust, leaving 8 soldiers alone in hostile terrain with minimal supplies and a mission that seemed designed to be impossible. Chen pulled out a map and compass. HVT could be anywhere in 60 square miles. That's too much ground to search randomly. We don't search randomly, Elena said, studying the terrain. We think like the target. Former Delta operator means he's trained in evasion and survival. He'll pick terrain that gives him advantage. High ground for observation, water sources for sustainability, multiple escape routes. She pointed to a series of ridgelines on the map. These canyons form a natural corridor, limited water sources, which means the HVT has to position near one of them. And if I were trying to evade 3 teams, I'd want a position where I could see them coming from miles away. Red Mesa, Sullivan said, recognition dawning. It's the highest point in the operational area. 360-degree visibility, natural defensive positions, and there's a spring about 2 clicks from the summit. That's where I'd be. The team moved out at a fast pace, using terrain to mask their movement. Elena's ribs screamed with every step, but the painkillers the doctor had forced on her were finally kicking in, dulling the edges of agony to something almost manageable. 2 hours into the movement, Ramirez signaled a halt. He'd spotted something through his binoculars. Contact, 11 o'clock, about 800 meters. Looks like Patterson's team. Elena took the binoculars. 12 soldiers moving in a loose formation across open ground, completely exposed. They were heading in the wrong direction, away from Red Mesa. They're lost, Chen observed. Or they have different intelligence about the HVT's location. Either way, they're not our problem. We maintain course and avoid contact. They skirted around Patterson's team, using a dry wash to mask their movement. It cost them 30 minutes, but kept them undetected. By midday, they'd covered 12 miles and were approaching the base of Red Mesa. That's when everything went wrong. The ambush came from a boulder field they'd been forced to traverse. One moment, they were moving through broken rock. The next moment, simulation rounds were impacting all around them. Elena's team scattered, diving for cover as automatic fire raked their position. "Contact rear!" Williams shouted.
"Multiple shooters!"
Elena's mind raced through possibilities. This couldn't be the HVT. He was one person, and this was sustained fire from at least 6 positions. Which meant... "Bronson," she said, the word bitter in her mouth. "He figured out our route and set an ambush." "We're pinned down," Martinez called from behind a boulder. "Can't advance, can't retreat without taking casualties." Elena assessed the situation with brutal clarity. Bronson had the high ground, superior numbers, and had caught them in a perfect kill zone. Conventional military doctrine said they were finished. Conventional doctrine also said she should surrender or take casualties trying to break out. But Elena hadn't survived this long by following conventional doctrine. "Chen, Sullivan, lay down suppressing fire on my signal. Everyone else, follow me." "Follow you where?" Martinez demanded. "There's nowhere to go." "Trust me." She didn't wait for agreement. She broke from cover and ran laterally, not away from the ambush, but parallel to it, moving deeper into the boulder field where the terrain was most broken and chaotic. Simulation rounds kicked up dust around her feet, but somehow none connected. The rest of her team followed because they had no better option. Elena led them through a maze of boulders that shouldn't have been navigable, finding gaps and passages that appeared at the last second. Her mind was working on pure instinct now, reading terrain the way Marcus Wade had taught her during those long nights in Yemen. "Natural cover is always better than man-made cover," he'd said. "Rocks and earth have been there for millions of years. They know how to hide things." They emerged from the boulder field at the base of Red Mesa, having somehow bypassed Bronson's ambush entirely. Behind them, she could hear confused shouting as Bronson's team realized their targets had vanished.
"How did you know that route existed?"
Sullivan gasped, breathing hard. "I didn't. I gambled that terrain this broken would have gaps if you looked hard enough." "That's insane." "That's asymmetric thinking. Now move before they figure out where we went." They started up Red Mesa at a punishing pace. Elena's ribs were on fire again, the painkillers wearing off at the worst possible time. She forced herself to keep moving, to show no weakness, because her team needed to believe she was invincible. Halfway up the mesa, Chen signaled another halt. He'd found something. Boot prints in the dust, recent enough to be fresh. "Someone came this way in the last few hours. Size 11 boots, standard military issue." "The HVT," Elena breathed. "We're on the right track." They followed the trail with increased caution. The HVT was former Delta Force, which meant he could have sensors, traps, or prepared ambush positions anywhere along the route. Every rock could hide a threat.
Every shadow could conceal an enemy. The summit of Red Mesa was a flat expanse of rock about 200 meters across, perfect observation point, perfect defensive position, and completely empty.
"Where is he?" Martinez scanned the area with his rifle raised. "The trail leads here. He should be here." Elena studied the ground more carefully. The boot prints continued across the summit and disappeared over the far edge. She moved to the rim and looked down, then started laughing despite the pain in her ribs. "What's funny?" Chen asked. "He was here. He saw us coming and left, probably watching us right now from a new position." She pointed to the canyon system below. "He's making us chase him, burning our time and energy while he stays fresh." "So what do we do?" Elena thought about the problem. A direct pursuit would play into the HVT's hands. He'd keep evading, keep them chasing until they were exhausted, or Bronson's team caught up and eliminated them both.
"We stop chasing him and make him come to us."
"How?" "By threatening the one thing he can't let us take, his water source." They descended Red Mesa and moved toward the spring Sullivan had identified earlier. It was a small seep coming out of rock, forming a pool barely 3 feet across. But in this desert, it was liquid gold. "We set up here," Elena directed. "Defensive positions covering all approaches. The HVT needs water eventually. When he comes for it, we take him." "What if he has other water sources?" Williams asked. "Then we've wasted time. But I don't think he does. This is the only reliable spring in 10 miles. Everything else is seasonal or dried up." They'd been in position for 20 minutes when Ramirez spotted movement. "Contact! 3 o'clock, 300 meters. Single individual, moving carefully." Through the binoculars, Elena could see him. A man in his 40s, lean and weathered, moving through the terrain like he owned it. The HVT. "Nobody fires until I give the word," she whispered. "Let him get close. We need positive capture, not a firefight." The HVT approached the spring cautiously, clearly aware it could be a trap. He circled once, twice, studying the terrain for any sign of ambush. Elena held her breath, willing her team to remain perfectly still. Finally, apparently satisfied, the HVT moved toward the water. "Now," Elena said quietly. Her team rose from concealment, weapons trained on the target from 8 different angles. There was no escape, no cover, no options. The HVT looked at Elena and smiled. "Outstanding tactical patience. Most teams would have opened fire the moment they saw me. You waited until I was committed." He raised his hands. "I'm captured. Well done." Elena approached carefully, still not entirely trusting the situation. "You're coming with us back to base." "I am. But first, you should know, you've got about 5 minutes before Bronson's team gets here."
"They've been tracking you since the boulder field."
"How do you know that?" "Because I've been watching them watch you. They're set up about 400 meters north, waiting to ambush you when you try to extract me." Elena's mind raced. They had the HVT, but were about to walk into another ambush. Even with their prize, they'd lose if Bronson eliminated her entire team. "Can you fight?" she asked the HVT. "I'm a role player in a training exercise. I can do whatever advances the educational objectives." "Then here's what we're going to do." The plan was desperate and relied on Bronson making assumptions about how Elena would operate. She was counting on him, expecting her to move directly back toward base, taking the fastest route with the HVT in tow. Instead, she did the opposite. "We're going deeper into the operational area," she told her team. "Away from base, away from the obvious extraction route." That's insane, Martinez protested.
Every minute we delay gives Bronson time to set up more ambushes.
Exactly what he's thinking. He's positioned his team between us and base because that's where he expects us to go. So we go the other direction, circle around, and approach base from an angle he's not defending.
The HVT nodded approvingly. Deception through unexpected action. I like it. They moved out, heading deeper into the canyon system. True to Elena's prediction, after 30 minutes they heard distant sounds of confusion and frustration from the north. Bronson's team, realizing their ambush position was worthless.
"They'll be hunting us now," Chen said. "And they're not going to be subtle about it."
Good. Angry people make mistakes. The route Elena chose was brutal. Steep climbs, narrow passages, terrain that exhausted them but would exhaust Bronson's larger team even more. She was using the same principle from the ruck march. Turn the enemy's strength into a weakness. Bronson's 16-person team could overwhelm her 8 in a direct fight, but it also meant 16 people trying to move quickly through difficult terrain versus 8. By late afternoon, they'd circled 3/4 of the way around the operational area and were approaching base from the southwest, the direction Bronson would least expect. That's when Patterson's team appeared out of nowhere. Both groups froze, weapons coming up, each assessing the other. Patterson himself stepped forward, hands visible but not raised. "Reeves, I heard you bagged the HVT." "We did." "Congratulations. Now hand him over." Elena's team tightened their formation.
"That's not happening."
"You're outnumbered and exhausted. My team is fresh. We can take the HVT by force, or you can surrender him peacefully and avoid casualties." Patterson's voice was reasonable, almost friendly. "There's no shame in it. You've already proven yourself by capturing him."
"The mission is to bring him back to base."
"We're completing the mission."
"With what? 8 people who can barely stand? Be realistic, Reeves."
Elena met his eyes.
"You're right that we're exhausted. You're right that you outnumber us. But here's what you're missing. My team has been fighting smart, while you've been wandering lost for 12 hours. We know this terrain. We know where Bronson's team is, and we know that if you start a firefight with us right here, right now, you'll attract his attention, and he'll eliminate both of us."
Patterson hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his face.
"But I'll make you a deal," Elena continued. "Help us get past Bronson's team, and when we reach base, I'll make sure everyone knows you provided essential support. You won't get credit for the capture, but you'll get credit for mission assistance."
"Why would I accept that instead of just taking the HVT?"
"Because deep down, you know that winning through cooperation is better than winning through betrayal.
And because tomorrow, next week, next month, you might need allies who remember you made the right choice." The silence stretched for a long moment. Finally, Patterson lowered his weapon. "Deal. But if this backfires, I'm blaming you." The combined force of 20 soldiers moved toward base with renewed purpose. They'd covered maybe 2 miles when Chen spotted Bronson's team ahead, 16 soldiers in a defensive position astride the main approach route. "They're dug in," Sullivan reported. "We can't get past without a fight." Elena studied the position through her binoculars. Bronson had chosen his ground well. Good sight lines, solid cover, positioned to force any approaching team into a killing zone.
"Then we give him the fight he's expecting, but not the one he's prepared for."
She outlined the plan quickly. Patterson's team would provide a frontal demonstration, not an actual attack, just enough activity to draw attention and fix Bronson's team in position. Meanwhile, Elena's team would flank wide, using a dry wash that ran parallel to Bronson's defensive line.
"When you hear sustained fire from our position, that's your signal to break contact and run for base," Elena told Patterson. "Don't wait for us. Don't look back. Just run." What about you? We'll be right behind you. Probably. Patterson's team moved into position. Elena's 8 began their flanking movement, using every scrap of cover the terrain offered. The dry wash was shallow, barely deep enough to conceal them, but it was enough. The firefight began with Patterson's team opening up with everything they had. Bronson's team returned fire, fully committed to defending their position. In the chaos and noise, no one noticed 8 soldiers moving through the wash 50 meters to their left. Elena's team bypassed the entire defensive position and emerged in open ground with a clear run to base. The HVT kept pace with them, clearly enjoying the tactical problem-solving on display. "You're going to make an excellent special operations officer," he told Elena as they ran. "Assuming you survive the rest of this program." Behind them, Patterson's team broke contact as planned and scattered. Bronson's team, realizing they'd been outmaneuvered, gave chase. The final 2 miles became a desperate race. Elena's exhausted team with the prize, Bronson's fresher team closing the distance. Elena's ribs were beyond pain now. Each breath was agony, each step was torture. Her vision was tunneling again, consciousness flickering. But the base was visible ahead, the finish line tantalizingly close. "They're gaining!" Martinez shouted. Elena looked back. Bronson's team was indeed closing, their longer legs and superior numbers allowing them to make up ground. They were maybe 100 meters back and closing fast. "Spread out," Elena ordered. "Make them choose multiple targets." HVT stays in the middle. We get him across that line no matter what. The base perimeter was 50 meters away. Bronson's team was 70 meters back. It was going to be close. Simulation rounds started impacting around them. Williams went down with a red impact sensor lighting up on his vest. Then Ramirez. The team was being torn apart in the final sprint. 30 meters. Bronson's voice roared from behind them. "Stop running and fight, you cowards!" 20 meters. Martinez took a hit and sprawled in the dust. 10 meters. Only Elena, Chen, Sullivan, and the HVT remained upright. Rounds were kicking up dirt all around them. Elena's right leg buckled. She started to fall. Sullivan grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. Together they crossed the line half a second before Bronson's team could eliminate them. Master Sergeant Cord stood at the finish line with a stopwatch. "Exercise complete. Team Reeves has successfully captured and returned the HVT. Total time, 14 hours, 32 minutes. Elena collapsed the moment she crossed the line. This time she didn't lose consciousness, but she couldn't move. Every system in her body had shut down simultaneously. Bronson appeared above her, breathing hard but still standing. "You didn't win. You ran away." "I completed the mission," Elena gasped. "That's what winning looks like." "You avoided every real fight. You manipulated Patterson into helping you. You used tricks instead of tactics." Cord's voice cut through the argument. "Bronson, in real operations, there is no such thing as a fair fight. There's only mission success or mission failure. Reeves succeeded. You failed. That's the only metric that matters." Bronson's face went purple with rage, but he said nothing. He turned and walked away, his team following like an angry parade. The HVT helped Elena to her feet. For what it's worth, that was the most creative evasion defeat I've experienced in 15 years of playing this role. Your team earned this win. The medical team was already moving forward with a stretcher, but Elena waved them off. "I can walk." "No, you can't," the doctor from earlier said, appearing with an extremely unhappy expression. "You've now upgraded from fractured ribs to what I'm almost certain is a partially collapsed lung. You're going to the hospital. Now." This time, Elena didn't argue. She let them load her onto the stretcher, her body finally admitting what her mind had refused to accept. She was broken. But as they carried her toward the medical transport, she looked back at her team. Chen, Sullivan, Martinez, Williams, Ramirez, and the others who'd trusted her unconventional approach enough to follow her through hell. They were battered, exhausted, some wounded. But they were smiling. Because they'd won.
Because they'd proven that thinking different could beat overwhelming force.
And as consciousness finally began to slip away, Elena thought about Marcus Wade and wished he could have seen it. Wished he could have known that his teaching, his patience, his belief in her had created something that worked. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was Cord's voice. "Get her stabilized. Tomorrow, we find out if she's tough enough to handle what comes next." What came next, Elena thought hazily, would have to wait. Right now, she needed to not die. Everything else could wait until after that. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and failure. Elena woke to the sound of machines beeping and a chest tube draining fluid from her partially collapsed lung. The doctor stood at the foot of her bed holding a tablet that probably contained her discharge papers, or her expulsion from the program. 48 hours, the doctor said without preamble. That's how long you've been unconscious. Your body finally gave up and forced you to rest, whether you wanted to or not. Elena tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. The doctor handed her water. How bad? Collapsed lung, now reinflated, 4 fractured ribs instead of 3, severe dehydration and electrolyte imbalance, rhabdomyolysis that nearly required dialysis. Oh, and a lovely case of heat exhaustion that could have killed you. The doctor sat down. You're done, Reeves. Medically disqualified from continuing the program. I've already submitted the paperwork. The words hit harder than any of Bronson's punches. Done. Disqualified. After everything she'd survived, after proving herself again and again, her own body had betrayed her. There has to be a way. There isn't. Your recovery time is minimum 6 weeks before you can return to any physical training. The program ends in 10 days. The math doesn't work. Elena closed her eyes. Marcus Wade had died 8 months ago, and she'd promised herself she'd become the kind of operator who could have saved him. She'd endured the hostility, the sabotage, the physical destruction of her body. All for nothing. However, the doctor continued, and Elena's eyes snapped open. Master Sergeant Cord is outside. He's been here every day since they brought you in. He wants to talk to you before the medical discharge becomes official. Hope flickered, small and fragile. Send him in. Cord entered looking like he hadn't slept in 2 days. He pulled up a chair and studied Elena with an expression she couldn't read. How you feeling? Like I got run over by a tank. You look worse than that. He was quiet for a moment. The medical discharge is real. You can't continue the current program. But before you spiral into despair, I want you to understand something. In 23 years of running advanced warfare training, I've seen maybe 5 soldiers who possessed true strategic genius. Most operators are good at following orders, some are good at giving orders, but very few can actually think 3 moves ahead and create solutions that don't exist in any manual. I don't feel like a genius right now. You're not hearing me. What you did over the past 2 weeks, the urban warfare assault, the ruck march, the field exercise, that wasn't just competence. That was innovation. You took SEAL tactics and integrated them with conventional operations in ways that made both approaches stronger. Cord leaned forward, his weathered face serious. Your class graduates in 10 days. They'll receive their certifications, their new assignments, their commendations. You won't be there for that ceremony. But 3 months from now, after you've recovered, I want you to report to Fort Bragg for a different program entirely. Elena's heart rate picked up. What program? It doesn't have a name yet because it doesn't officially exist yet, but there are people very high up the chain of command who've been watching your performance here. They want to create an experimental training unit that develops hybrid operators, soldiers who can think like special operations but function within conventional command structures. You want me to be a student in this program? Cord smiled, the expression transforming his scarred face. I want you to help design and lead it. You'd be working directly with SEAL instructors, Delta Force advisors, and conventional warfare experts to create integrated tactical doctrine. You'd be training the trainers who will reshape how the military approaches complex operations. The offer was so far beyond what Elena had expected that she struggled to process it. Why me? I couldn't even finish your program without my body breaking down. Because your body breaking down proves you'll push beyond any reasonable limit to complete a mission. Because you turned a hostile environment into a functioning team through sheer competence. Because you won every challenge using methods that shouldn't have worked, but did. Cord stood up. You don't need to answer now. Recover, heal, think about it. But understand that what you started here is bigger than one training program. You've proven that unconventional thinking can be systematized and taught. That's revolutionary. After he left, Elena lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile failure and opportunity existing in the same space. She'd been medically discharged from the program that was supposed to validate her transition from intelligence to operations, but she'd also been offered a chance to influence military tactical doctrine at the highest levels. Her phone buzzed. Chen had been texting updates every few hours since she'd been hospitalized. You awake? We need to talk. Important. Elena texted back, Come to the hospital. 20 minutes later, Chen, Sullivan, Ramirez, and Martinez crowded into a room, faces grim. We heard about the medical discharge, Chen said. It's bullshit. You earned graduation more than anyone in that class. The doctor's right, though. I can't train for 6 weeks. The program ends in 10 days. That's not why we're here, Sullivan said. We're here because Bronson is trying to rewrite history. Elena felt ice form in her stomach. What do you mean? Martinez pulled out his phone and showed her a video. Bronson was being interviewed by someone from Military Public Affairs, talking about the field exercise. We employed standard tactical doctrine to secure the operational area, Bronson's voice came through the phone speaker. Some teams attempted unconventional approaches that ultimately failed, requiring rescue by more experienced operators. The successful capture of the HVT was a team effort, with proper military leadership making the critical decisions. Elena's hands clenched into fists. He's claiming credit for my team's work. It gets worse, Chen said. He's been talking to the other trainees, spinning a narrative that you were reckless and endangered your team, that your injuries prove your methods are unsustainable, that real operators don't break down after 2 weeks. Half the class is buying it, Ramirez added bitterly. They saw you get carried off on a stretcher and decided that proves Bronson was right all along. Tough guys win. Clever tactics fail. Sullivan leaned against the wall. We've been pushing back, telling anyone who'll listen what actually happened. But without you there to defend yourself, it's hard to counter his version of events. Elena processed this new betrayal. She'd won every challenge, completed every mission, proven herself again and again, and now Bronson was stealing her victories while she lay in a hospital bed too broken to fight back. What do you want me to do about it? I can't even stand up without help. We want you to come to the graduation ceremony, Chen said. Even if you're not graduating, even if you have to show up in a wheelchair, we want people to see you and remember what you actually accomplished. And say what? That I'm the real winner even though I'm medically disqualified? Say that you changed how we think about warfare, Martinez said quietly. Say that you proved intelligence and creativity are just as important as strength and aggression. Say that the future of military operations isn't about doing things the way we've always done them. It's about being smart enough to adapt. Elena looked at their faces, these soldiers who'd started as skeptics and become true believers. They needed her to finish what she'd started, even if the ending wasn't the one she'd imagined. I'll be there. The next 8 days were brutal. Elena's body was healing, but slowly. The chest tube came out on day 3, leaving her able to breathe without mechanical assistance, but still weak and easily exhausted. Physical therapy started on day 4, simple movements that left her shaking with effort, but she worked through it with the same determination that had carried her through the ruck march. Every painful breath, every difficult step, every moment of frustration was fuel for the anger burning in her chest. Bronson thought he'd won, thought he could erase her contributions and claim her victories. She was going to prove him wrong one final time. The night before graduation, Michael Wade called. I heard about the medical discharge. Marcus would be pissed at you for breaking yourself, but proud that you didn't quit. I feel like I did quit. My body gave up. Your body did what it was supposed to do. It forced you to survive instead of killing yourself trying to prove a point. Michael was quiet for a moment. Elena, Marcus didn't die because you weren't there. He died because war is chaos, and sometimes good people die despite everyone's best efforts. You've been trying to become the operator who could have saved him, but that's not possible. What is possible is becoming the person who ensures future operators are better prepared, better trained, better equipped to handle the chaos. Cord offered me a position developing hybrid tactical training. I know. He called me to ask about your character. I told him you're the most stubborn, brilliant, self-destructive person I've ever met, and exactly what the military needs. Michael laughed softly. Take the position, Elena. Stop trying to rewrite the past and start creating a better future. Graduation day arrived with typical Arizona heat. Elena sat in a wheelchair in the back of the ceremony area, Chen and Sullivan on either side of her. The assembled trainees looked crisp in their dress uniforms, 28 graduates from the original 48 who'd started the program. Bronson sat in the front row, surrounded by his supporters. He looked confident, victorious, completely certain of his narrative. Master Sergeant Cord took the podium. 28 of you completed this program. You survived challenges designed to break you. You proved yourselves capable of operating in the most demanding environments the military can create. He paused. But completion and understanding are not the same thing. Elena saw Bronson shift uncomfortably. This program is designed to produce soldiers who can think as well as fight, who can adapt instead of just react, who can turn impossible situations into achievable missions through creativity and determination. Cord's eyes swept across the assembled graduates. Some of you learned those lessons. Others simply survived through stubbornness and traditional tactics. Bronson's face was reddening. The field exercise that concluded this program was won by an 8-person team led by a soldier who couldn't physically complete the program due to injuries sustained during training. That team was outnumbered 2-1, operating with minimal resources, facing multiple threats simultaneously. And they succeeded by doing what conventional military doctrine says is impossible. They outthought, outmaneuvered, and outperformed every advantage their opponents possessed. Cord gestured toward the back of the room. Elena Reeves couldn't finish this program, but she fundamentally changed how we think about tactical operations. She proved that size, strength, and numbers can be overcome by intelligence, creativity, and strategic thinking. Every graduate sitting here today learned something from watching her work, whether they're willing to admit it or not. The room was completely silent. "Reeves, I need you up here." Chen and Sullivan helped Elena stand. She moved slowly to the front, each step painful but manageable. The walk felt like miles, every eye in the room watching her. Cord handed her a certificate. "This is not a graduation certificate. You didn't complete the program requirements. This is something else entirely. This certifies that you successfully demonstrated advanced tactical innovation and strategic leadership in combat scenarios. It's signed by the program director, the base commander, and 3 special operations officers who reviewed your performance." Elena looked at the document, genuinely surprised. "I don't understand." "You're being assigned to Fort Bragg to help develop the Asymmetric Combat Integration Program. You'll be working with SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, and Ranger Regiment to create training protocols that bridge conventional and unconventional warfare." Cord smiled. "Essentially, you're going to teach the entire military to think the way you think." Bronson stood up, his voice tight with anger. "This is ridiculous. She failed the program. She couldn't hack it physically, and now you're rewarding her?" "Sit down, Bronson." "No, I won't sit down while you validate failure and call it innovation. Real operators don't break down after 2 weeks. Real soldiers don't need to cheat and manipulate to win exercises." Cord's expression went cold. "You're absolutely right that real operators don't break down. Which is why your psychological evaluation flagged you for anger management issues and inability to adapt to changing tactical environments. You completed this program, but you didn't learn anything from it. Your new assignment is Stateside Training Facility, where you'll teach basic infantry tactics to new recruits." Bronson looked like he'd been slapped. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious. You're a good soldier, Bronson. You're strong, you're capable, you follow orders excellently, but you're not a strategic thinker, and you're certainly not someone who should be leading innovative operations." Cord turned to address the entire room. "The military is changing. The enemies we face don't fight conventional battles anymore. They use asymmetric tactics, guerrilla warfare, terrorism, and cyber attacks. We need soldiers who can think beyond textbook responses. We need operators who can create solutions in real time instead of waiting for orders." He looked at Elena. "That's what Reeves represents. Not physical perfection or traditional military excellence. She represents the future of warfare, where intelligence and adaptability matter more than brute force." The ceremony continued, but Elena barely heard it. She was processing the magnitude of what had just happened. She'd come to Fort Sentinel to prove she could be a combat operator. Instead, she'd proven something far more important: that the way military operations were conducted could evolve, could improve, could integrate new thinking with traditional doctrine. After the ceremony, a steady stream of graduates approached her. Some offered grudging respect, others genuine congratulations. Even Patterson stopped by. "I was wrong about you," he said simply. "I thought unconventional meant undisciplined. You proved that wrong." Chen, Sullivan, Martinez, and Ramirez formed a protective circle around Elena's wheelchair, running interference when she looked too exhausted to continue talking. "We're all putting in for transfers to Fort Bragg," Chen announced. "If you're creating a new program, you're going to need instructors who actually understand what you're trying to accomplish." "You'd give up your assignments for that?" Sullivan grinned. "Are you kidding? The chance to be part of something that might actually change military doctrine? That's better than any deployment." Bronson appeared one final time before leaving, his face still tight with anger and humiliation. "You didn't win, Reeves. You just convinced Cord to lower standards and call it innovation." Elena looked up at him from her wheelchair, and for the first time since arriving at Fort Sentinel, she felt no need to prove herself to him. "You're right, Bronson. I didn't win your game. I changed the rules entirely. And 20 years from now, when soldiers are using integrated tactical approaches to save lives and complete impossible missions, they'll never know your name. But they'll be using methods I helped develop." She paused, letting that sink in. "That's not winning. That's legacy." Bronson had no response. He turned and walked away, and Elena knew with complete certainty that she'd never see him again. He'd fade into the ranks of competent but unremarkable soldiers, while she would help shape the future of military operations. 6 weeks later, Elena stood in a conference room at Fort Bragg, her ribs fully healed, facing a room full of special operations instructors who'd been pulled from active duty to help develop the Asymmetric Combat Integration Program. "The traditional model," she began, "says that conventional forces and special operations forces are fundamentally different. Different training, different missions, different tactical approaches. What I'm proposing is that the distinction is artificial. The skills that make SEAL teams effective, strategic thinking, adaptability, unconventional problem solving, can be taught to conventional soldiers. And the discipline and systematic approach that conventional forces excel at can enhance special operations effectiveness." A SEAL instructor raised his hand. "With respect, what you're describing sounds good on paper, but ignores the reality that special operations requires years of specialized training. You can't just teach conventional soldiers to think like SEALs." "You're absolutely right. You can't teach them to be SEALs, but you can teach them to apply SEAL-level strategic thinking to conventional operations." Elena pulled up a video of her team's urban warfare exercise at Fort Sentinel. 8 conventional soldiers with minimal special operations exposure successfully executed a complex multi-vector assault using tactics borrowed from SEAL doctrine. They didn't become SEALs. They became better conventional soldiers. She clicked through more footage: the field exercise, the tactical decisions, the adaptive problem solving. "What I learned at Fort Sentinel is that most soldiers are capable of far more than we ask of them. We train them to follow procedures and execute orders, which is important, but we don't train them to think creatively about tactical problems. We don't give them tools to adapt when circumstances change. We don't teach them that sometimes the smartest solution is the one that isn't in the manual." A Delta Force advisor leaned forward. "What you're describing is special operations selection process. We filter for people who can think this way naturally." "Exactly. You filter for it, which means you're limiting your talent pool to people who already possess those skills. What if, instead of filtering, we taught? What if we could take good soldiers and make them great by adding strategic thinking to their existing capabilities?" The room was silent, instructors processing the implications. "I'm not suggesting we eliminate special operations units or pretend that every soldier can do what SEALs and Delta do. What I'm suggesting is that we can raise the baseline tactical capability of conventional forces by teaching them the cognitive approaches that special operations uses. Make them smarter, more adaptable, more capable of handling complex scenarios." A Ranger instructor nodded slowly. "You're talking about democratizing tactical innovation." "Yes, exactly that." Over the following months, Elena worked 16-hour days developing curriculum, testing approaches, refining methods. Chen, Sullivan, Martinez, and Ramirez became her core instructor team, bringing practical experience from their time at Fort Sentinel. The first pilot class consisted of 30 conventional soldiers from various units, all volunteers, all skeptical that the program would deliver on its promises. Elena stood before them on the first day and saw herself reflected in their faces, uncertain, defensive, waiting to be proven wrong. "I'm not here to make you into special operations soldiers," she began.
"I'm here to make you into better versions of yourselves, to give you tools that will make you more effective in any tactical situation, to teach you that thinking smart is just as important as being tough." She told them about Fort Sentinel, about being the outsider, the analyst girl who didn't belong, about facing hostility and sabotage and physical destruction, about proving that unconventional approaches could succeed against overwhelming opposition. Some of you are wondering if this program is real or just some experimental nonsense that will disappear in 6 months. I'll be honest, I don't know if it will last. But I know that what I'm going to teach you works because I've used it, because I've won with it, because I've proven it under conditions that were designed to make me fail. The 12 weeks that followed were intense. Elena pushed the class hard, but differently than traditional military training. Instead of physical punishment and rote memorization, she taught them to think critically about tactical problems, to question assumptions, to find creative solutions. The same resistance she'd faced at Fort Sentinel appeared in modified form. Students who believed that traditional methods were sufficient, that innovation meant abandoning proven doctrine, that thinking differently meant being undisciplined. But slowly, inevitably, the shift happened. Students who'd been skeptical started proposing unconventional solutions to training scenarios. Soldiers who'd relied on brute force began incorporating strategic misdirection. The class evolved from individuals executing orders to a cohesive unit that could adapt to any challenge. The final exercise was a modified version of the field exercise from Fort Sentinel. 30 students against a SEAL team playing as opposition force, tasked with locating and securing a high-value target in challenging terrain. Len watched from the command center as her students executed a plan that combined conventional military structure with SEAL-style asymmetric tactics. They didn't try to out-SEAL the SEALs. They used their own strengths, discipline, systematic approach, coordinated teamwork, enhanced by strategic thinking and creative problem-solving. They won in 6 hours, 3 hours faster than Elena's team had managed at Fort Sentinel. The SEAL team leader approached Elena after the exercise, respect clear in his expression. "Whatever you're teaching them, it works. That was one of the most tactically sound operations I've faced in 15 years. They thought like us, but fought like conventional forces. It's impressive." Word of the program's success spread rapidly through military channels. Requests came in from units across all branches asking for the training to be expanded. Within a year, asymmetric combat integration had grown from one experimental class to a full training school. 2 years after her medical discharge from Fort Sentinel, Elena stood before a congressional committee explaining why the military should formally adopt integrated tactical training across all combat units. "Traditional military doctrine served us well in conventional warfare," she testified. "But modern threats require modern solutions. The enemies we face use asymmetric tactics because they work. If we continue training our soldiers to fight yesterday's wars, we'll keep losing today's battles." She presented data, mission success rates, casualty reduction, operational efficiency. Every metric showed that soldiers trained in integrated tactical approaches outperformed conventionally trained units. "This isn't about replacing what works. It's about enhancing it. It's about giving every soldier the tools to think strategically, to adapt quickly, to solve problems creatively. It's about building a military that's as smart as it is strong." The funding was approved. The program became official doctrine. And Elena Reeves, who'd started as an intelligence analyst trying to prove she could be a combat operator, became the architect of a tactical revolution that would reshape military training for decades. On the 5th anniversary of Marcus Wade's death, Elena visited his grave with news she wished she could have shared in person. "We did it, Chief.
The program you started teaching me in Yemen? It's official military doctrine now. Thousands of soldiers are learning to think the way you taught me to think. They're completing missions that would have been impossible 5 years ago. They're surviving situations that would have killed them using old methods. She placed her hand on the headstone. I never became the operator who could have saved you. But I became something better. The person who's making sure future operators have every possible advantage. That's the promise I made, and I kept it. Walking back to her car, Elena's phone rang.
It was Cord. I need you back at Fort Sentinel. We've got a new class starting, and I want you to give them the opening address. Tell them what this program is really about.
What is it really about?
You tell me. You're the one who figured it out.
Elena thought about the journey, from outsider to innovator, from broken body to transformed military doctrine, from proving herself to proving that everyone could be better. It's about refusing to accept that there's only one right way to accomplish a mission. It's about having the courage to think differently, even when everyone says you're wrong. It's about understanding that real strength isn't just physical. It's mental, strategic, adaptive. Then that's what you tell them. See you next week. Standing in front of 48 new trainees at Fort Sentinel, Elena saw familiar expressions: skepticism, determination, fear, hope. She remembered being exactly where they were, uncertain, and trying to prove something she hadn't fully defined. 5 years ago, I stood where you're standing. I was told I didn't belong here, that I was too weak, too different, too unconventional to succeed in military training. Some of you are probably looking at me right now and thinking the same thing, that a woman who couldn't physically complete the program has no business teaching you anything. She paused, meeting their eyes. You're going to face challenges here that break you down. You're going to encounter resistance from people who think different means wrong. You're going to have moments where quitting seems smarter than continuing. And in those moments, you'll have to decide what matters more: proving you fit into someone else's definition of what a soldier should be, or proving that you can redefine what's possible. I didn't finish the original program. My body gave out before graduation, but I changed how the military thinks about tactical operations. I created training doctrine that's saving lives right now in combat zones around the world. I turned failure into legacy. She smiled at their uncertain faces. That's what this program really teaches. Not how to be the toughest or the strongest or the most traditional soldier. It teaches you how to be the smartest, the most adaptable, the most innovative operator. It teaches you that your mind is your most powerful weapon, and creativity is just as valuable as courage. Some of you will graduate from this program, some won't. But all of you will leave here different than when you arrived. You'll think differently about warfare, about leadership, about what's possible when you refuse to accept limitations. Elena looked at each face in turn, remembering her own journey, and knowing that some of these soldiers would face similar struggles, similar breakthroughs, similar transformations. Welcome to Fort Sentinel. Welcome to the hardest training you'll ever experience. And welcome to the opportunity to become something greater than you ever imagined possible. Because that's what Elena Reeves had proven, first for herself and then for thousands of others. That being underestimated was only permanent if you accepted it. That physical limitations could be transcended by mental superiority. And that one person willing to think differently could change everything. They'd boxed her in during training, dismissed her as too small and too weak and too different to succeed. She'd responded by rewriting the entire definition of success, proving that Navy SEAL tactics combined with conventional military discipline created something more powerful than either approach alone, and building a legacy that would outlive everyone who'd ever doubted her.
That wasn't just victory. That was revolution.
and Elena Reeves had led it from a hospital bed to the highest levels of military command, one impossible mission at a time.